You ever get that feeling you're being watched, but when you turn around, nothing's there? That's how it started for me. My name's Daniel Carter. I moved to Blackwater, Texas, last winter. Population 1,203, if you count Old Man Haggerty's borderline feral hogs. The town's got one gas station, one diner that closes at sundown, and St. Mary's Church, the kind of place with a steeple so crooked, you'd swear it was built by drunks. The first time I laid eyes on that church, I felt a chill run down my spine. It loomed over the town like a sentinel, its weathered stones whispering secrets of a time long past. The townsfolk rarely spoke of it, and when they did, their voices dropped to hushed tones, as if the very walls had ears. I remember sitting at the diner one evening, the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. I overheard a couple of old-timers at the counter, their faces lined with worry. "You hear the bells last night?" one asked, his voice trembling. "Ain't right, I tell ya. They only ring when something's coming." I chuckled to myself, dismissing it as just another ghost story to scare newcomers. But deep down, a seed of unease took root. Then came that fateful night. It was 2:58 a.m. when the silence shattered. I was jolted awake by a sound that felt like it was clawing at my insides, a slow, rusty clang, echoing through the stillness of the night. I sat up, heart racing, and listened. Clang, clang. The sound was coming from the church. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the wooden floor cold against my feet. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, the chill of the night air wrapping around me like a shroud. The street was empty, the only light coming from the flickering street lamp at the end of the block. As I approached the church, the bells rang again, louder this time, reverberating through the air like a death knell. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Then came the whispers. Daniel, my name, carried on the wind, sent shivers down my spine. I turned, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the street was empty, just shadows dancing in the dim light. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and jumped into my truck. I had to get out of there. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The church stood there, its steeple glowing an unnatural red, as if it were alive. The next morning, I returned, the sun casting a warm glow over the town. But the unease lingered. I parked outside the diner, hoping to find some answers. Marnie, the waitress, looked at me with wide eyes as I recounted my experience. "You shouldn't have gone near the church at night," she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bells ring for a reason. They say it's a warning." I laughed nervously, but deep down, I felt the weight of her words. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the memory of the bells and the whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming for me. And then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again, the bells ringing at 3 a.m. This time, I didn't wait. I ran. The first time I asked about the bells, I was sitting at the diner, nursing a cup of burnt coffee that tasted more like regret than caffeine. Sheriff Grady was at the counter, his weathered face a map of lines and creases, each one telling a story of its own. He spat his tobacco into a mug, the sound echoing in the otherwise quiet room. "Folks who hear him don't tend to stick around for answers," he said, his voice gravelly and low, as if he were sharing a secret meant for my ears alone. I raised an eyebrow, half expecting him to break into laughter, but he remained serious, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the distance. The other patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact, as if the very mention of the bells was enough to summon something dark. Marnie, the local waitress, leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bells only ring when something's coming for you." Her eyes darted around the room, as if she feared someone or something might overhear. I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Marnie. Ghost stories, right? Just a bit of local folklore to scare the newcomers." But her expression didn't change. She looked at me with a mix of pity and concern, as if she could see the naivety in my laughter. "You don't understand, Daniel. This isn't just a story. People have gone missing after hearing those bells. It's not something to take lightly." I shrugged it off, dismissing her words as the ramblings of a small-town waitress trying to keep her customers entertained. But deep down, A seed of doubt began to sprout. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the dim light. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the town. The way the locals avoided the church, the way they spoke in hushed tones, it all felt like a warning. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I had always been a skeptic, a man of reason. Ghosts and legends were for those who needed an explanation for the unexplainable. Then came the night when I heard them myself. It was just past 2:58 a.m. when the first clang echoed through the stillness. I jolted awake, heart racing, the sound reverberating in my chest. I sat up, straining to listen, and there it was again, a slow, deliberate clang, like a bell tolling for the damned. I threw on my clothes, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had to know what was happening. I stepped outside, the cool night air biting at my skin, and made my way toward the church. As I approached, the bells rang out again, louder this time, each chime sending a shiver down my spine. I felt a presence, something lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. Shadows flickered in the corners of the street, and I could have sworn I heard whispers carried on the wind, calling my name. Daniel. I froze, the sound wrapping around me like a vice. The laughter I had shared with Marnie and Sheriff Grady felt distant now, replaced by a gnawing fear that clawed at my insides. I turned to run, my heart pounding in my chest, but the bells continued to ring, echoing in my mind long after I had fled. The legend was real, and I was now part of it. It was 2:58 a.m. when the silence broke. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a heavy blanket, making every sound feel amplified, every heartbeat echoing in your ears. I was deep in sleep, lost in dreams that felt too real, when the first clang jolted me awake. A slow, rusty clang, like metal dragging against the earth. It reverberated through the stillness, pulling me from the depths of slumber. Then another, and another. Each sound was deliberate, as if the bell were calling out to me, summoning me from the safety of my bed. I sat up, heart racing, the remnants of sleep fading away. I glanced at the clock, 2:59 a.m., and felt a chill creep down my spine. I looked outside, peering through the window, half expecting to see someone standing beneath the church steeple, ringing the bell. But the steeple wasn't moving. It stood there, stoic and silent, bathed in the pale light of the moon. Yet the sound, God, the sound was inside my head, echoing like a haunting melody that refused to fade. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep, but the clangs continued, each one more insistent than the last. I could feel the vibrations in my bones, a primal instinct urging me to run, to hide. But curiosity held me captive. Then came the whispering, barely there, like wind through dead grass. It was soft at first, almost soothing, but as it grew louder, it morphed into something sinister. Daniel, no mistaking my name. It was a voice I didn't recognize, yet it felt intimately familiar, as if it had been waiting for this moment to call out to me. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage like a caged animal desperate to escape. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the wooden floor cold against my feet. I hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the need to understand what was happening. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest, urging me to step outside. With a deep breath, I grabbed my jacket and opened the door, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. The street was empty, the only light coming from the flickering street lamp at the end of the block. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the darkness itself were watching me. As I approached the church, the clangs intensified, each one resonating in my chest. I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me, the shadows stretching and twisting in ways that defied logic. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the darkness, but there was nothing, just the oppressive silence and the relentless ringing of the bell. Then, the whispers returned, more urgent this time. Daniel. I froze, the sound wrapping around me like a vice. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, my heart pounding in my ears. I sprinted back to my truck, the sound of the bells echoing in my mind long after I had fled. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The church stood there, its steeple silhouetted against the moonlight, a dark sentinel watching me leave. I could still hear the bells ringing, a haunting reminder of the night I had crossed into something I couldn't understand. That was the first night I heard the bells, and it would be a night I would never forget. I grabbed my keys, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the metal. The sound of the bells still echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder of the terror I had just experienced. I bolted outside, the cool night air hitting me like a wave, and sprinted toward my truck parked in the driveway. The street lamp flickered above me, casting erratic shadows that danced along the pavement. It felt as if the darkness was alive, stretching and contorting in ways that defied reason. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a war drum, urging me to escape. As I reached my truck, I glanced around, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. That's when I saw them. Figures, standing perfectly still between the houses, their forms barely discernible in the dim light. They were pale, almost ghostly, with elongated limbs and tilted heads that seemed to defy the natural order. Their eyes, dark voids, were fixed on me, unblinking and unyielding. I felt a chill wash over me, a primal instinct screaming that I was not alone. I hesitated for a moment, my breath hitching in my throat. The whispers returned, swirling around me like a tempest, urging me to flee. Daniel, I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped into my truck, slamming the door shut as if that would somehow shield me from whatever was lurking outside. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the ignition, the engine sputtering to life. With a surge of adrenaline, I floored it out of the driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt. The truck lurched forward, and I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figures chasing after me. But they remained still, watching as I sped away, their presence lingering like a dark cloud over my thoughts. As I drove through the empty streets of Blackwater, the familiar surroundings felt foreign and menacing. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, reaching out as if trying to pull me back. I could still hear the bells ringing in my mind, a haunting melody that echoed with every turn of the wheels. Then, I looked back in the rearview mirror again. My heart dropped. The church was glowing red. Not the warm glow of a street lamp or the soft light of a porch bulb, but a deep, pulsating crimson that illuminated the night sky. It was as if the church itself had come alive, a beacon of dread that beckoned me to return. I could see the steeple silhouetted against the glow, twisted and grotesque, like a finger pointing toward the heavens. Panic surged through me, and I pressed down harder on the accelerator, the engine roaring in response. I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me, the darkness closing in as I raced toward the edge of town. The road ahead twisted and turned, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away, to put as much distance between myself and that church as possible. The figures were still in my mind, their pale faces haunting me, their eyes boring into my soul. As I reached the outskirts of Blackwater, I glanced back one last time. The church was still glowing, a sinister lighthouse in the night, and the bells rang louder than ever, echoing in my ears like a death knell. I turned my gaze back to the road, determination flooding my veins. I wouldn't look back again. Whatever was waiting for me in that town, I was done with it. But deep down, I knew the truth. The bells would always call me back. The next morning, I drove back into Blackwater, the sun rising slowly over the horizon, casting a warm glow that felt almost surreal after the terror of the night before. The town looked different in the daylight, less menacing, yet somehow more haunting. The familiar sights of the gas station and the diner stood as they always had, but the weight of last night's events hung heavily in the air. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white as I navigated the empty streets. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night. There were no whispers, no figures lurking in the shadows, just the sound of my truck's engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. As I approached St. Mary's Church, a sense of dread washed over me. The steeple loomed in the distance, its crooked silhouette cutting against the brightening sky. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, a primal instinct warning me to turn back. But I couldn't. I needed answers. I parked my truck in front of the church, the engine sputtering to a stop. The air felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, and walked toward the church sign. That's when I saw it. A crow perched on the sign, its beady eyes fixed on me, unblinking and unervingly aware. It tilted its head, as if assessing my very soul, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The bird seemed to know my sins, to understand the darkness that had crept into my life since I arrived in this town. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. I approached the church, the wooden door creaking as I pushed it open. The interior was dim, the sunlight filtering through the stained glass, casting colorful patterns on the floor. But the beauty of the light did little to ease my anxiety. I stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and something else, something metallic. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the church, the silence pressing in around me. I half expected to hear the bells ringing again, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Then, as I turned to leave, I noticed something on my windshield. I stepped outside, squinting against the sunlight, and my stomach dropped. A single rusty handprint smeared across the glass, the color stark against the clear surface. It was unmistakable, the fingers elongated and twisted, as if they belonged to something not quite human. I felt bile rise in my throat as I reached out to touch it, the cold metal of the truck contrasting sharply with the warmth of the sun. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? Was it a trick of the light? But deep down, I knew the truth. The handprint was real, a chilling reminder of the night I had tried to escape. I glanced back at the church, the crow still watching me, its gaze unyielding. I could feel the weight of the town pressing down on me, the shadows lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. I got back into my truck, my heart pounding as I started the engine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn back into the darkness, that the bells would call to me again. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The church stood there, silent and foreboding, the crow still perched on the sign, a sentinel watching over the secrets of Blackwater. I knew then that I couldn't escape the past. The bells would always ring, and the shadows would always linger.